All right. Hi, everybody. This is John Rue from Proceptual, and I'm joined today by Chris Hood, who is the founder of Mnemonic. Hey, Chris.
Hey.
Chris, you are one of the most prolific writers on LinkedIn in the AI governance world. So I know that our audience will be really thrilled to talk to you. And let me just start with some brief introductions. I introduced you as the founder of Mnemonic, but you've done like a lot of different stuff over your years. And I'd love just kind of some background on you in terms of like, how did you get from where you started to where you are now?
Yeah, probably not what people would expect. I mean, I talk about it often. My first job was actually working at a movie theater.
Nice.
And a lot of my background and experience was in entertainment. And what I started to notice, I kind of jokingly say I had two career paths. One was going into the movies, or the other was going into technology, and no one cared about technology. So I decided to go into film, and then later decided to, kind of shift. Technology was always a hobby. It was always something I just did for fun. And when I started to make that shift was around the time when we started to see, the web as an example, the internet as we know it today. If we were to really put an interesting spin on it, is entertainment, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to want to go to a website. It has to be meaningful to you. There is marketing around it, and if you don't enjoy the visit to that site, you're not going to go, right? So every site that you engage in on a daily basis is something you enjoy. That is entertainment by definition. And so what I started to see organizations struggle with was trying to figure out a way to really bridge the gap between what the business needed and how technology was going to help them fulfill that. And a lot of my career from that point on was really acting as kind of this facilitator, a strategic facilitator between the technology side and the business side. And then throughout my career, working with some really great companies like Disney and Universal, and doing a lot of startups. And then I landed at Google, where I started doing a lot of work around just strategy in general, transformational type of strategies for organizations. From an AI perspective, I've been in AI for probably 25 plus years. I've done a lot of different types of things with a lot of different types of organizations, all in that same mindset. How do we leverage AI to benefit us? And then today I do Nomadic. I do a lot of AI governance stuff. I do a lot of AI stuff, broadly, strategies. I write. My newest book is getting ready to come out. So
Nice.
Yeah, I stay busy. And there's probably one other little thing to share in here, the transition into governance, but I think an upcoming question will help me get you to that point.
Perfect. What's the topic of your book?
My new book is on customer journey mapping, but what I have basically declared is that the traditional customer journey mapping is pretty much dead, primarily due to artificial intelligence. And so I've introduced a new framework for how do you construct journey maps in the age of AI.
Nice. Well, we'll look for that one for sure. So you kind of gotten to from a totally different industry, entertainment, kind of like organically to where you are now in terms of AI governance. And one of the things that that our students and a lot of people, and myself for sure too, are thinking about now is like everyone's interested in AI governance. And it's kind of like it's like a new career, didn't really exist like the way that we think of it now, and even like 5 or 10 years ago. And so a lot of people are kind of talking about like, how do we get into this industry? So if you were trying to kind of like break in from, and you broke in from the entertainment industry, but like, if you were coming from sort of like a more mainstream GRC background, or if you were coming from like the policy world, how would you think about building the skills that you would need to do the work that you're doing now?
Yeah, I mean, you started to touch on a lot of them. So what becomes really interesting is, if I was to overly simplify this, I think AI governance is the bridge where I was talking about, kind of the bridge between entertainment and technology, and even the bridge between business and technology. AI governance is really going to be more about legal and technology, right?
Mhm.
It's a lot more of the legalities of how technology operates than I think a lot of people consider. Um, and so anybody who's out there thinking about like law degrees, I think that's a big part of it. The other side of this is actually psychology, sociology, like some of these philosophical types of careers. When we think about things like behavior, so agent behavior, and then the ability for us to be able to manage or govern that agent behavior. Well, the more you understand about human nature and human behavior, the better that you'll be able to better, understand how agents are going to start to behave. So I think that's going to be a huge area that we're going to see a lot of companies and students, start to navigate is these psychological types of career paths.
That's really interesting. So and I'm playing back, I think what you said. So if you were kind of starting out trying to get into this industry, you would focus more on law, policy, psychology, sociology than you would on like learning Python and like learning like machine learning operations, et cetera.
Yeah, because here's the thing. It's really hard to teach a computer how to be philosophical. It's very easy to teach a computer how to program Python.
Mhm.
And so if you understand, say, behavioral science, you can tell, say, Claude Code to build whatever you want based on your understanding of behavioral science. You cannot go to Claude and basically say, provide me with behavioral science concepts, and then I'm going to go and build some code around it. Well, I mean, technically you can, but the philosophy behind that and the strategy behind that is a lot more complicated because there's so many nuances within behavior that the current AI technologies can't pick up on, and that's really the distinction that I think people have to be familiar with.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's very interesting. So, let me transition a little bit. The thing that it seems like a lot of your writing is about, and from my understanding of Mnemotic, is you're really focused on kind of this like runtime decision-making layer of systems in production. And one of the big challenges, and I'm going to ask a bunch of questions about it that our students, and I think a lot of people that who are coming from philosophy, policy, law, psychology have is we kind of get like, okay, we're going to write policies, we're going to do impact assessments, we're going to, do training sessions, or we're going to like create, audit lists and all that. But transitioning from that work into how do you govern agents in production, I think is the big question that for myself, for sure, and I think a lot of us are trying to get at. So let me start by asking, and then we'll kind of work backwards. What does Mnemotic do?
So at a very high level, Mnemotic is an agent management platform. And so what do we mean by agent management? There are a lot of different things that you need to do in order to manage those agents. Identity, for example, is one. You have to be able to have an identity for the agent. And this could be simply, I call you John, you call me Chris. So there's our identity.
Mm-hmm.
Another way you can look at this is we have social security cards, right? In the United States, I have one, you have one. They're unique. They identify who we are. So agent identity is a thing that we need. It's also critical to have that because in order for me to govern what John does versus govern what Chris does, I need to be able to specify what the ID of that agent is so that I can then audit John and audit Chris. So agent identity, but then things like deployment. How do we get this agent to production? How do we kind of move it through the development life cycle? How do we test it? How do we make sure that it's doing what we want it to do? That's part of the management philosophy. Governance is also in there. Audit trails could be considered part of governance. It could also be considered outside of governance, or at least the runtime portion of it. We also have a marketplace that we're going to introduce where people will be able to come and basically build, buy, and sell agents that do things. So if you kind of think of it as a complete environment where everything you would need to basically manage, run, analytics, look at your agent, that's all included inside of Nomotic.
I love it. So can you explain a little bit about how do we, so from a, I guess from a technical perspective, how does it work? So we have, we're at an organization, we've got a dozen, probably more, but let's say we've got a dozen AI systems. Do we like API connect them up to Nomotic, and the Nomotic sits on top?
Yeah, so this is the one thing that we are doing that is different than what everybody else in the industry is doing. I look at this as we're basically building, you can call it a marketplace, but an ecosystem where we can actually host your agents. Mm-hmm. So you build your agent in whatever language you want to build it in. You zip it up like in a, like a typical zip file. And then you upload it into Nomotic, and then we start to host it. We manage it. We walk you through the process of doing it. We're really designing Nomotic to be an environment for non-technical people to be able to manage their agents. So right now, we could argue, probably not even a good argument, but agents are basically pieces of code. So going back to your first question, like learn Python, because that's how you build agents. You go and you develop something, and it's pretty technical. But how do we get this to a point where it's no longer technical, right? How do we get it to the point where your marketing manager can manage a fleet of agents without understanding Python? It's same to if you compare it to like a website. Right now, you can go to a host and you can build a website, and they host your website. Mm-hmm. You don't really have to understand how to build a website. You can use WordPress and it's there. We want to build that type of environment for agents so that the average person can basically have agents and not be technical, which aligns more with, having the psychology degree than having the technical degree.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. So backing up a little bit, let's go back to this. I've kind of got this avatar that you described of the AI governance professional who's, trying to enter the industry and comes from a background that's primarily not technical and maybe comes from philosophy, psychology, like we had talked about. What should they be learning, and how should they upskill themselves such that they kind of move from the ability to, like write policies and training documentation to the ability to govern agents in runtime on a more technical level? Like, how do they start to scaffold those skills up?
Yeah, there's several things in there. And I want to kind of take one small step back and provide a philosophical kind of definition in this. Because I do a lot of writing, and you might have seen this, others may have seen it. And I think it's a foundation for how I think about this entire environment. So, and it boils down to the word autonomy. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure if you were playing this in a class and you asked all your students, and I would love for you to do this, like how many of you right now feel that systems, AI agents are autonomous? And you're probably going to get most of the people to raise their hand. The thing is that language is actually marketing language. Mm-hmm. No system is actually autonomous. And I've had a lot of really interesting debates about this. And so this concept, right, of autonomy means self-governance. It means that the system is able to govern itself. And in reality, what we're talking about is that a human who wants to become an AI governance expert, well, now you are in the loop. And this is more than human in the loop. This is the fact that we have a term called heteronomy. Heteronomy or heteronymous artificial intelligence means that a human is in the loop and is participating in the governance activities. And this framework, this kind of mindset, just to set a foundation for us, provides us with a lot of insights, because what we are seeing is organizations that believe that systems are actually autonomous are actually separating themselves from the responsibility of what a system does.
Mm-hmm.
Recently in the news, there was a lot of press around this company that basically had AI delete their entire database, in 9 seconds. If you haven't seen this article, it's out there everywhere. And I have argued that that's human error. That is not AI, right? Somebody told AI to do what it did, and it did it. AI didn't just wake up one morning on its own with a will and start to make a decision and say, I think oh, wow, here's an API key. What does this do? Oh, look, it could delete. I'm going to delete it, like maliciously. Like, it doesn't work that way. And so this understanding of humans being in the loop has to be expanded to every system in the world a human is responsible for, and we cannot separate that. And if we start with that mindset, then we can say, okay, everything that I need to know is really based on how do we create systems where humans can participate meaningfully in the governance process, so that as we begin to automate some of this, we still recognize where the human responsibility is.
Mm-hmm.
If you can wrap your thoughts around that one piece, then the psychology and the philosophical and philosophy types of degrees start to make more sense, this behavioral science, because we have to understand how agents are behaving even when they are not autonomous.
Yeah, that's really smart. And I think that one of the distinctions I see a lot for people entering the profession is that some people, I think, come in with the assumption that AI is evil and we need like lots and lots of regulations because we're going to get like the Terminator or whatever. And I don't like see that like currently happening. I think I agree completely with what you said. So pulling back what you said, like, it sounds like the goal of governance from your perspective is functionally to figure out how does a human get in the loop in every system, and then extrapolating from that, how do we train the humans to understand what they should be like doing in the loop, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, look, your point about Terminator is spot on, right? Because, again, coming from the movie background, we have been trained to believe that AI is what it is from what we've learned from the movies. None of it is based in reality. And I would even argue that a lot of the regulations that we are seeing, like the EU AI Act and some of the other NIST types of governance protocols that are being introduced, are all being written with the sci-fi mindset of what they believe AI is capable of. So they're being written out of fear. And in most cases, they are not aligned with actual real life capabilities of AI today. Now, can we get to that point? Maybe. But the autonomy kind of argument is proof of that. Like when we are trying to manage systems and create regulations based on the belief that systems are autonomous, well, we're starting in the wrong place. Right off the bat, our governance frameworks are faulty. And so, yes, we have to really kind of take this step back, come to a better understanding of what systems actually are capable of, And maybe that is a good start for students. Like, do a lot of research, not just go and read press releases and even social media. Most of social media is overly hyped, but go and really understand what AI can and cannot do. And when you understand that capability index, then you can start to realize more how to govern that, because you're not governing it based on something that doesn't exist.
Yeah, I love that. That makes perfect sense. Let me pull that thread a little bit, because it seems to me like, so the central idea of, systems aren't fully autonomous. I certainly agree with your perspective, and I think that was much more true 4 months ago. And as the speed of technology increases, I agree we don't have autonomous systems now, but the ability for humans to enable much more autonomy, even with like very off-the-shelf systems like Claude Code or even Claude Cowork, that's becoming much more autonomous. How does the AI governance professional think about that question as we get somewhat closer to what you might call autonomy?
Well, I mean, look, my argument is we're nowhere close to autonomy. We're 20 years or more, right? You have to actually have a system that recognizes it as a self. Now, there's definitely a philosophical, nature to that statement, but by definition, autonomy is self-governance. That means that the system has to recognize itself, which it doesn't. And even in how you phrase this question, like levels of autonomy or being able to, get things today that have more autonomy to them. Really what we're saying is more levels of automation. These are just increasingly more sophisticated forms of automation. You are still telling the agent to do something. You are still telling the system to do something. How long that goes, how much it does, the systems it touches is all based in logic of what you told it to do. A great example of this is, if we were to simplify it, is making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right? If I just said make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, everybody who's listening probably has a mental picture of what that entails. And even if I say, make the peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but now you do not have a knife, we are able to quickly identify alternative solutions. That's how AI is working. AI is not like, if I said, hey, I got this agent, whatever, I got an agent and I'm going to send it to you. What do you think happens at that point?
You're going to send me like a zip file? Is that like functionally that question?
Yeah, well, I send you a zip file. I send you an agent. I send you this thing and I call it an agent. What happens?
Well, I think your point is nothing unless I do something with it.
Nothing. Exactly. Nothing happens unless you do something with it. There are no systems out there that are waking up in the middle of the night and deciding to do something unless you programmed it to wake up in the middle of the night and do something.
I love that.
And everything that it has access to, the knife to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, the bread, the peanut butter, the jelly, the knife, are in its tool sets and have been programmed to do that. Here's another quick example in terms of logic and understanding AI. If I said book a business trip, what's the first thing you would do?
I would, like, if I was booking it for myself,
yeah,
I would want to know where I was going.
Okay. And then after you knew where you were going, what would be the next thing you would do?
Then I'd open Google Flights.
Okay. We'll just go with that. You would book your flight first.
I would.
Why wouldn't you book the hotel room first?
Because I think that hotels are easier to book and more flexible than airline fares and timetables.
And we could argue that if you booked the flight and, potentially you had to change the date, then you would have to go back and change the hotel date that you've booked as well, right?
Correct.
Okay. That logic that we just walked through is the same logic that AI does. You don't have to tell it to like go book a flight, go book a hotel room, go book it in this order. And so a lot of times we'll say, well, or people will argue systems are autonomous because you can just say, schedule my my business trip, and it knows all of these things that it has to go and do. Well, yeah, like that's not autonomy. That's just basic common sense that we as humans can recognize. And that, if you were to ask your agent to do the same thing, it probably too would book your flight first and then book your hotel room, because that's a natural course of events. That's not autonomy. You still told it what to do. And this, again, these are the kind of, use cases that we have to go through, because then we can start layering on, now, how do we govern that process? Because we understand how that logic is being facilitated, because it's within a natural understanding of how we as humans would facilitate it.
That's a great answer. And it brings me to my last big question for you. So a couple weeks ago, you'd posted an article. It went, I would say, semi-viral on LinkedIn. I was really jealous of the engagement. And the title was, "Is AI governance overhyped?" So, is AI governance overhyped?
Yeah, I tend to feel a little bit. It is. Is it needed? Yes. Is a little bit overhyped? Yes. And again, I point out that some of the reasons why I think it's overhyped is because you have all of these policies that are now coming out saying that, AI has to be governed. Again, I think that when the EU AI Act was published, I saw, like 20 companies spurt out overnight saying, we manage this. Well, they're just getting, that kind of market grab. And I think, again, I wrote another piece that was, is there a difference between AI governance and governance of AI? And really, that I think is more critical to why it's overhyped, because governance broadly, technology governance broadly, has not changed in 20 years. Like most organizations have always had the capacity to govern the technology, do an audit, do password protections, right? Have a firewall for things that go in and out. It's really funny to me when I see a company that says, oh, well, there's no way for us to govern AI, right? It's really hard. And it's like, well, yeah, just put a block of all of the AI tools on your firewall and you're done. Like, it's very easy. You choose not to do it. And I think that choice to not do it is the critical component. A lot of companies choosing to allow AI to do the things that it's doing and not choosing to further restrict it. And there's a fear of being left out that, is in that process, fear that, competitors are going to be in better position. This is why we see a lot of people claiming that they have autonomous agents as purely marketing. And really it's only, I kind of call them macros, they're little bits of code that automate things. So the overhyped nature is because they're applying it to AI. If we were to strip AI out of governance and we were just saying, hey, we need governance for all of this new AI stuff, most organizations already have those policies, procedures, tools in place. The other part of it is they'll argue, well, yeah, but with AI governance, it happens faster. The systems are performing at lightning speed, and we have to be able to make a decision about if it can do this, at an instant. Yeah, part of that is valid, but also part of it is a misunderstanding of what AI is, going back to what we talked about before. And if you're so concerned that AI is going to make a decision that you do not like, don't use AI. There's lots of other tools that you can use that probably can accomplish the same thing.
I love it, Chris. That's as always, a nuanced take. I'll let you have the last word there. So Chris, thank you so much for joining us, founder of Nomadic. Folks should follow you on LinkedIn, I assume. Is there any other way that you like for folks who want to follow you to engage?
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn is a great place for you to find me. So you pretty easy to look up. You know, you can find Chris Hood at Nomadic, and you'll find me. My website is chrishood.com. So if you wanted to go and check out my website and find my new book and those types of things, that's all right there. But yeah, feel free, reach out, say hi. Happy to chat.
All right. Thanks again, Chris. We'll see you later. Thanks for the time.
Thanks.